year.
He dragged that woman through the courts since 1997. That case was only settled in 2010. Where does it end? When do you stop subjecting people to this prolonged anguish and this suffering, and pretending at the same time that you're a holy man and that you are doing God's work?
The case involving the woman in Canada backfired on Cardinal Brady. It was her lawyers who discovered that in 1975, Sean Brady had taken statements from two teenage boys, aged 14 and 15, who said Father Smyth abused them. And it was Sean Brady who supervised an oath of secrecy taken by the two boys.
Well, here was evidence that as far back as 1975, he had known about the abuse of these two children and furthermore had sworn them to secrecy, which is, it's the essence of the crime. The secrecy, this is our secret, don't tell anybody. This is the thing that the victims have to live with all their lives. And here was the head of the church in Ireland implicated 100%.
In 1975, Bishop Francis McKiernan set up a canonical inquiry to establish firm grounds for withdrawing the faculties, that's the licence to practice as a priest, from Father Brendan Smyth. It took the form of a question and answer sequence under oath before a notary. I was that notary. I didn't have decision-making powers for that in that inquiry, and that inquiry set to work.
The Cardinal said he handed over the paperwork to his boss, Bishop Francis McKiernan.
I insist again, I did act and acted effectively in that inquiry to produce the grounds for removing Father Smyth from ministry, and specifically it was underlined that he was not to hear confessions, and that was very important.
Confessions, my arse.
Samantha was a survivor of Brendan Smyth's abuses from 1974 to 1979.
This guy raped me and he abused me and he took everything that should have been precious to me.
Samantha was absolutely distraught when she responded to Cardinal Brady's comments on a local radio station in the Republic.
If they had done their job right, I wouldn't have been abused by Brendan Smyth. I would have been saved all that torment and torture and loss and everything that goes with that. I would have been saved that. I know two people who have died by suicide as a result of being abused by Brendan Smyth after 1975.
The Cardinal was questioned about why in 1975 he did not act to inform the Gardaí.
I did act.
To contact the state authorities, to contact the guards, the police, to go to the proper authorities. Why did you not do that?
Even today, the appropriate person to do that is the designated person. I was not that person.
Well, he keeps passing it off as being he did his job and passed it on to his superiors. They just kept it between themselves. It's just so hard to take in that somebody knew.
I don't accept Cardinal Brady's explanation. I don't accept the explanation of an SS officer during the Second World War when they were allowing people to go off to be slaughtered. I don't accept the explanation of anyone who stands by idly when children are being sexually abused.
Let's just hear the Cardinal again.
Even today, the appropriate person to do that is the designated person. I was not that person.
Where was the Cardinal in 1994 as the police in Northern Ireland prepared their case against Father Brendan Smyth? Did he share his information with them? Or in 1997, when Brendan Smyth was jailed in Dublin, did he share his information with the Gardaí? Or did the Cardinal simply continue withholding information about the criminal activities of a child rapist? Or perhaps he wasn't the designated person. Andrew Madden not only survived abuse by a priest, but also a campaign by the Dublin Archdiocese to discredit him. He feels Cardinal Brady has persistently failed his moral obligations.
You know, he kept the truth to himself from 1975 for the 18 years that Brendan Smyth was free to carry on abusing children. And even when Brendan Smyth was going through the courts in the 1990s, Sean Brady kept the truth to himself.
The Cardinal didn't seem to have a clear answer when he was asked to explain how taking Smyth's licence to hear confessions would safeguard children.
How would that stop children being abused?
Because he was out of contact with but the responsibility for his behaviour as a priest rested at all times with his religious superior in Kilnacroft.
He had information about a man who was going around raping and abusing children, and he didn't do anything personally about it. He's saying he did his job, he passed it on to his superiors. It wasn't his responsibility, it was because he was an adult and he knew this man was still going around abusing children. He knew that, and he did nothing to stop it.
And he had a moral obligation to make sure that Brendan Smyth wasn't left in a position where he could reoffend. And he can't just abdicate himself of that responsibility and say he told his bishop.
In 1976, just 12 months after Sean Brady's inquiry, Smyth's religious order sent him back to America, this time to Langdon in North Dakota. Because his abuses were not made known to his new hosts, he had pastoral duties, including taking confessions. And of course, he abused. In 1994, we interviewed one survivor who'd received $20,000 from Smyth. Smyth's links with Langdon ended in 1983. However, as a rapist priest from Ireland, he was not alone.
One of the most chilling examples, I think, of how a sexually offending priest thinks and behaves is a deposition taken of Father Oliver O'Grady.
In this clip, O'Grady from Tipperary demonstrates how he would approach a young girl for sex.
How about just use the name Sally?
Okay. Hi Sally, how you doing? Come here, I want to give you a hug. You're a sweetheart, you know that. You're very special to me. I like you a lot.
O'Grady abused hundreds of children during 30 years in the United States.
Tempted to, and often did, maybe raise her dress in a kind of subconscious way, or should I say in a way that she's not aware that I'm doing that, but checking her out at the same time, you know. You get a glimpse of her underwear.
And did you find that arousing?
I did, yes.
O'Grady served 7 years in an American jail. On his release in 2003, he was deported to Ireland.
I will add that I don't think I molested girls that way as much as I would have done boys.
It was Pat Wall who found O'Grady in Ireland and who was present for the video deposition.
What I've found in the last 10 years of working on childhood sexual abuse cases is that the Church has systematically, over the centuries, applied the geographic solution by taking a priest and, after he is offended, moving him to a place where the scandal is not known. And we specifically see this in Ireland, where they will move the priest from Ireland into the United States, into multiple different locations.
Oliver O'Grady remains at large, although he was held in custody briefly this past week in Dublin, arrested and then bailed on charges of possessing pornographic images of children. Like O'Grady, Brendan Smyth had a voracious appetite for taking sexual gratification from children, and to date the Catholic Church has concealed the true extent of the horrific damage they've done to children and their families.
The biggest chance we have for the truth to be told is, a number of factors can make that happen. A courageous public prosecutor can get at the truth and publish blistering investigative reports, as has happened in Philadelphia and New Hampshire, and even in Boston.
Step forward Will Delker, Senior Assistant Attorney General in New Hampshire. In January 2002, he began a criminal investigation into the Diocese of Manchester. He investigated the diocese as he would have investigated malpractice at a normal business.
We tried, again, to think about it. What would we do if this was a regular corporation, a civil corporation, and how would we approach it, and how would we approach this investigation. We were very, very mindful to try to keep the religious aspect of this case, you know, separate from the criminal activity. But I mean, the scope of the problem went on for decades, and that, I mean, certainly in my experience, is something we've never seen before.
Tom Doyle saw this criminal activity firsthand, starting in the 1980s. His Catholic faith was severely challenged when his reports about bishops covering up paedophile priests were ignored.
When I was writing up the first reports, I really believed that once these reports were seen by the right people, once the information was given to the right people, both the leadership of the Catholic Church in the United States and in the Vatican, they would certainly want to do the right thing, because this is horrendous. These are children that are being violated sexually, emotionally, spiritually by priests. And they have bishops covering up for these priests.
There are many bishops in Ireland that have handled these exact same cases. There are many bishops in the US and Australia and all over the world who have handled these exact same cases. And because they were good at handling these cases, they got promoted.
Back in New Hampshire, the bishops were doing everything they could to hamper the investigation, fighting state prosecutors and defying a grand jury subpoena to hand over their secret files on paedophile priests.
They filed a motion to quash, which means basically asking the judge to deny the subpoena, to say they didn't have to comply with it. The judge issued a very scathing order saying that they were obligated to comply, that the grand jury had the power to pursue this, and that if they didn't comply, they would be found in contempt of court.
They weren't worried about the damage to the children or the children's parents. They were worried about the damage to the institutional church, to their control, their power, their income, their financial base.
Will Delker's investigation found enough evidence to convict the Catholic Diocese of Manchester on criminal charges. And amazingly, so strong was the evidence that the Catholic Church could do nothing but enter a plea of guilty.
They had to admit that we would have been able to convict them if we went to trial. They had to agree to allow us to release all of the files and records that we had gathered during the criminal investigation. And they had to agree to have an audit, basically an oversight by our office for 5 years to supervise their implementation of a child protection plan.
This deal saved the bishop from prosecution, although a number of individual priests were prosecuted. However, it wasn't long before the church was backtracking on the deal.
Initially, well, they agreed to these audits, and that was very promising, but very quickly they went back on their agreement. And so we had to fight them in court again and have a judge order them to engage in the type of oversight that we had envisioned.
The civil authorities have dealt with it much more rigorously in the US. If you remember when the Murphy Commission contacted the Papal Nuncio here looking for information for its investigation, the blatant snub that the Commission got, I believe that they felt that that was all right because there was such a cosy relationship in Ireland between the Church and the state.
We only know the truth about what happened in Dublin because the taxpayer spent about €3.5 million on a state inquiry. And it was an inquiry that had the authority to seize documentation if necessary and to compel witnesses to attend. That's why we know the truth about the church in Dublin, which is a church which calls itself a church of the truth, but we only get the truth out of it when it's forced in front of statutory inquiries. That's our experience in this country.
Still to come, Brendan Smyth's last victim of abuse before he was sent to prison. She talks for the first time about her ordeal at Christmas in 1993. Criminal investigations in the United States exposed the huge cover-up by the Catholic Church. But as Christmas 1993 approached in Ireland, Brendan Smyth was on the run from the RUC. 18 years after Sean Brady's church inquiry, which stopped him hearing confessions, he was about to inflict an act of extreme cruelty on 12-year-old Mary.